I'm John Batchelor with Thaddeus McCotter, my colleague and co-host, and friend, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes. That's Detroit, Michigan. And we go to John Fund to report on updating the Republican and Democratic results. They're very close, but what's close about the Republicans is number 2 and number 3. John, what can you tell us right now? How much is in, and what do you see between Mr. Rubio and Mr. Trump?
97% in, Cruz 28, Trump 24, Rubio 23.5, Carson 9.
So Rubio has closed within a 0.5 percentage point of Trump right here at the end.
Yes.
97% in. That looks very much like a solid Cruz win. 97% in. Any indications, John, about what's left to report?
It's cats and dogs. I would say it leans somewhat more urban than rural. Rubio has done very well in urban counties, especially their suburbs. So I would say, if I had to guess, I would say Trump by half an eyelash in the end.
Thaddeus, Mr. Rubio now goes to the TV shows tomorrow morning to explain his surprising success in Iowa. And how does he explain himself looking to New Hampshire next week, Mr. McCotter?
Well, it's like a 2-chord Rolling Stones song. It's really just A-E-A. 1, he's acceptable to the Republican base. 2, he is obviously the most electable in the general election. And 3, he has an aspirational message to show that he will get elected president. That's it. I mean, he's, as John Fund has said, as everybody's noted, he shattered expectations. He needs to do those 3 things and just continue to do them until he gets the nomination.
So his message is, I'm electable, I'm electable, I'm electable.
I'm acceptable to you, the base. I am electable to the American, I'm your best chance to have a Republican elected, and here's my aspirational message for all of you.
And Mr. Fund, I won't speculate about Trump because he's not a politician, so he's unpredictable. Mr. Cruz, how does he present himself to the morning audiences? Both those men are going to be highly desirable on the morning shows.
Cruz will say, I united the conservative coalition, and I beat the giant Trump. And by the way, to put Trump's percentage in perspective, John, he did less than 2% better than Pat Buchanan in Iowa in 1996. Buchanan had no money and was up against a Kansan, Bob Dole. And frankly, if you look at this regarding expectations, for Donald Trump to do just about what Pat Buchanan did is humiliating.
Mr. Cruz's presentation, John, I want to follow through on this. Mr. Cruz is going to say, I am the conservative candidate. That's sufficient?
Yeah, well, he will say, I can unite the conservative movement. I united libertarians and Tea Partiers and social conservatives and evangelicals in Iowa. And Rocco Rubio is a poseur. He's not a real conservative, and I'm the real thing. And I can turn out votes because I have a get out the vote operation that like no one has ever seen.
We are not speculating about Mr. Trump because he's not a politician and therefore he can go almost anywhere. It's totally unpredictable. So I want to move over to the Democratic side because, John, can you give us results on the Democrat? It's a profoundly different kind of caucus on the Democratic side. I understand Mr. O'Malley has suspended his campaign, so this is the end of the 3-part race until and if somebody else gets in. How close are the Clinton-Sanders votes now, John? Can you see?
81% of the vote is in, and Bernie Sanders trails Hillary Clinton by 1 percentage point.
Is that a surprise to you, John?
Well, not according to latest polls, but it's a surprise to anyone who thought 6 months ago that Hillary Clinton was steamrolling to the nomination. For Hillary Clinton to basically tie a 73-year-old Democratic socialist in Iowa is, frankly, also humiliating.
Mr. McCotter, do you have insights into the attraction of Bernie Sanders? Is this Democratic revolt more profound? Actually, there's no revolt in the Republican Party to see tonight. This is very straightforward, recognizable Republicans choosing conservatives over the unknown. But on the Democratic side, can you explain the attraction of Bernie Sanders to the young people or even the Democrats in general, Mr. McCotter?
Well, it's really, in some ways, number one, that the progressive wing has embraced Bernie Sanders because apparently he's crazy enough to please them. And then you also have the aspect that he's a protest vote against what is perceived as a Democratic establishment, which many Democrats are not comfortable with. And there's the very fact that, as Mr. Fund and Mr. Drucker and everyone has pointed out that Hillary Clinton is just not a candidate that even her own people can embrace that wholeheartedly. So I think that his numbers show a multiplicity of problems with the Clinton campaign. And I think that, as Rita, I believe, pointed out, or Mr. Fund pointed out, the Democratic turnout didn't have a lot of young people. Their numbers were not clearly as contested as the Republicans. There's not a lot of enthusiasm for that nomination. And the problem that they have between Sanders and Ms. Clinton is they're not even exciting their own base.
John, Hillary Clinton right now, how does she present herself to the morning shows? Because she is also going to be a highly desirable guest, and she will want to put the face on this that looks like a tie.
I lost Iowa, which had a very low turnout compared to a primary in 2008, and I won in New Hampshire. So I'm going to do the same thing again, and I have the infrastructure and the support in all 50 states, and Sanders has that in only 2 states.
However, she's headed into New Hampshire, which is sizably for Sanders, and I suspect after tonight's results will even grow the more so. Does Mrs. Clinton just talk her way past New Hampshire next week?
Well, what's her entire campaign been about except talking past reality? Look at her email explanations.
Mr. McCotter, imagine presentation by Bernie Sanders in the morning. How does he present this very close? It looks like a tie right now.
Well, he'll claim that he's helping to move the progressive agenda forward, that he's a candidate that understands real people's needs, and that he has fought her to a standstill in Iowa, and he will point. Unlike, as John has said about Ms. Clinton, he will point to New Hampshire. And that's really where he's got to make a stand, because now the expectations are going to be on him to deliver in New Hampshire and prove that he can actually be a David to a Goliath.
Gentlemen, I just had Rita Cosby, the political director of WABC, hand me this note. Fox is calling the Republican election for Senator Cruz a win. The final numbers look roughly what you gave us, John, 28, 24, 23, the top 3 finishers, 99% of the total in, and Cruz wins. So let's deal with that, because we're going to have to deal with it for these next days until New Hampshire. Mr. Fund, Cruz now upsets the apple cart in New Hampshire. He was not polling especially well. Do you expect him to go into number 1 now after this result tonight?
There will be enormous pressure from donors for Bush, Christie, Kasich, and Fiorina to drop out and consolidate the anti-Trump, anti-Cruz vote, which the Republican establishment doesn't like either candidate. So basically, they want to put all their chips on Marco Rubio. Marco
Rubio, I see, to stop Trump and Cruz at the same time. But Trump is doing very well in New Hampshire. Does that go topsy-turvy after this tonight, John? Was it all about expectation and not fact?
I think the Trump vote in New Hampshire will very much be like the snow in Washington today, which was melting at 60-degree temperatures.
Yes, I turned around and saw no snow on the 7th Avenue today, and I thought, is this winter? Is this spring? Thaddeus, the success of Mr. Cruz, he's a conservative's conservative. That is the strength of the party these last years. Does that attract the rest of the party to unify about Cruz, or are they going to hold off?
The key numbers, as Rita pointed out about the undecideds predominantly going to Mr. Rubio, is what basis did they make that decision on? I don't think they necessarily made that decision wholly on stopping Cruz or stopping Trump. I think a lot of them said, we've nominated conservatives in the past, and we can get our 45% and a President Obama. I think how many of those people who made the last-minute call for Rubio did it on the basis of winning a general election is going to be the key going forward.
Therefore, the Iowans have very carefully anticipated what the rest of the nation is going to see in Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, the 2 junior senators, Texas and Florida, and the unorthodox new politician, Donald Trump. Right now, Fox is calling it for Cruz, 28 to 24 for Trump to 23 from Rubio. I'm John Batchelor.